आप बोलिए सर, आप बोलिए।
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Third, first MBBS, starting pediatric lectures today, the 27th of May, Thursday, 2021. Introduction to the field of pediatrics. Pediatrics, pedos and iatrikos, the two words mean child and healer, is the only discipline dedicated to all aspects of the care and well-being of infants and children as well as the adolescents, including their health, their physical, mental, social and psychological growth and development, and their ability to achieve full potential as adults. Pediatricians must be concerned not only with organ-specific systems, the genetics and biologic processes, but also with environmental, psychosocial, cultural and political influences, all of which may have major impacts on the health and well-being of children and their families. Advocacy is an important component since children cannot advocate wholly for themselves. As the professionals, the pediatricians whose purpose is to advance the well-being of children, pediatricians must be advocates for the individual child and for all children, irrespective of culture, religion, gender, or sexual orientation, race or ethnicity, or of local, state or national boundaries. The more politically, economically or socially disenfranchised a population is, the greater the need for advocacy for its children and for those who support children. Slide दिखाएं, आवाज है। एक मिनट, मैं लिखने का नहीं, स्लाइड दिखने से। Youth are often the most vulnerable persons in society and thus their needs require special attention. Coming to the global perspectives, as the segmentation between nations blur through the advances in media, transportation, technology, communication and economics, a global rather than a national or a local perspective for the field of pediatrics becomes both a reality and a necessity. The interconnectedness of health issues across the world has achieved widespread recognition in the wake of the COVID-19, the Zika, the Ebola, the SARS and the AIDS epidemics, war and bioterrorism, the tsunami of 2004, the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, the displacement of families during Syrian refugee crisis in 2016 to 18, and the growing severity of droughts, hurricanes and cyclones, Tokte and Yash 2021, brought about by climate change. The historical perspective is of great importance. Medical care of children finds place in the ancient Indian, Greek and Chinese systems of health. But as a formal discipline, pediatrics took root in Europe and the US in the 19th century when some of the famous children's hospitals were established. Thus, more than a century ago, pediatrics emerged as a medical specialty in response to increasing awareness that the health problems of children differ from those of adults, and that a child's response to disease and to stress varies with age and development. In India, the first children's hospital was established by Dr. George Coelho in 1928, the famous BJ Hospital for Children, Mumbai. Thereafter, he worked and developed the department as the medical superintendent. Later in 1946, Professor S.T. Achar took up the Department of Pediatrics at Government General Hospital, Chennai, today known as Egmore Children's Hospital. And later in 1948, from the Navy, Dr. Shantilal Shise set up the Department of Pediatrics at the Nair Hospital and Topiwala National Medical College, Mumbai. In 1959, the United Nations issued the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, articulating the universal presumption that children everywhere have fundamental needs and rights. Today, an affirmation of those rights and an effort to satisfy those needs are more important than ever. Coming to the vital statistics about children's health globally and then to our country later. From over the 100 years, we may not go down, but at least the last few decades we need to see the changes. And what we expect, the population growth and the proportion of children, and what happens to these children in terms of their health status. From 1990 to 2010, the world population grew at an annual rate of 1.3% per year, down from 1.8% during the prior 20 years, that is from 1970 to 1990. This rate continues to decline. In 2016, the growth rate was 1.13%. Thus, 1970 it was 1.8%. In those 30 years after that, in those 20 years thereafter, 1.3%, and now 1.13% is the world population growth rate. Of this worldwide today, of the world's population of 7.4 billion persons, there are 2.34 billion children 18 years and younger. That defines the age till where we should care for them, that is their teens, from birth and even before. So this accounts for approximately 1/3, that means 32% of the world's population of 7.4 billion persons. Coming to the birth rate in 2016, 18.5 births per thousand population, that is the global birth rate, with a high extreme of 44.8 per thousand in Niger, to the lowest in Monaco at 6.6 per thousand. Coming to the most populous countries, China, India and the United States have the rates of birth rate of 12.4 China, 19.3 India and 12.5 United States per 1000 population. So we need to remember that the birth rate is 19.3, pretty high. What are the factors determining child health? Despite global interconnectedness, the health of children and youth varies widely between and within regions and nations of the world, depending on several interrelated factors, important of which are: 1. The economic conditions, 2. The educational, social and cultural considerations, 3rd. The health and social welfare infrastructure, 4th. The climate and geography, 5th. The agricultural resources and practices which account for nutritional resources, 6th. The stage of industrialization and urbanization, 7th. The gene frequencies for certain disorders, 8th. The ecology of infectious agents and their hosts, 9th. The social stability in the region, and 10th. The political focus and their stability. Although genetics, biology and access to affordable and quality healthcare are important determinants, it has been shown that the social determinants of health, that is the physical environment, the political and the economic conditions, social and cultural considerations, and behavioral psychology play as great a role, if not greater, in health outcomes. Coming to the Millennium Developmental Goals. To ensure that the needs of children and adults worldwide were not obscured by local needs, in 2000 the international community established 8 Millennium Developmental Goals, the MDGs, to be achieved by 2015. Although all 8 MDGs impact child well-being, MDG 4 was exclusively focused on children to reduce the under 5 mortality rate by 2/3 between 1990 and 2015. It was estimated that poor nutrition contributed to more than 1/3 of the deaths worldwide in children less than 5 years old. So many of the efforts to reach this goal centered on increasing household food security. Increasing measles vaccination, particularly in various countries globally, more so in sub-Saharan Africa, was another strategy to reduce the U5MR. There was some progress in achieving MDG 4. The worldwide U5MR decreased by 50% between 1990 and 2015 over these 15 years. Although the goal of a 2/3 reduction was not achieved. Deaths, however, in children under 5 dropped from 12.7 in 1990 million in 1990 to about 6 million in 2015. So we do see that there was success by the MDG 4 in terms of achievement, not the 2/3 but at least 50% reduction from 12.5 million to 6 million over these 15 years, despite the growth in the world population during the same period. The U5MR can be further subdivided into that involving the neonatal, that is less than 1 month of age, the infant component, that is less than 1 year of age, and after infancy, that is early childhood from 1 to 5 years of age. The leading causes of worldwide U5MR are preterm birth complications, perinatal asphyxia, and thereafter pneumonia, diarrhea, and malaria. Many of these causes are linked to malnutrition. Children in sub-Saharan Africa are 14 times more likely to die before the age of 5 years than children in the developed areas of the world. So if you see the global causes of under 5 deaths, 1 to 59 months on the left side, on the right side the neonatal deaths. So you have the highest incidence is of pneumonia on this side, and that is around 12.8%, and on the neonatal side is prematurity, that is 15.9%, and smaller components contributed by various other conditions, of which we need to think about intrapartum related events 10.7% in the neonate, the sepsis or meningitis, which is high, 6 to 8%, injury, congenital malformations, and on this side we need to think about the continuing risk of death of the preterm babies, which can range from 1 to 9%, congenital malformations 3 to 5%, and we have the other conditions of malaria, which ranges very high in many areas of the world. measles, and diarrhea. So pneumonia and diarrhea in blue and orange are a major segment cause of under 5 deaths. Tetanus, of course, has diminished and is less important because of effective antenatal care, immunization of the mother, and therefore prevention of tetanus neonatal. The mortality differences seen differ greatly between developed and developing nations. In developing countries, 66% of the deaths in children less than 5-year-old resulted from infectious and parasitic diseases. Among the 42 countries having 90% of the childhood deaths, diarrheal disease constitute 22%, pneumonia 21%, malaria 9%, AIDS 3%, and measles 1%. And of the remaining 33% neonatal causes. So these are the areas where the difference needs to be made by concerted efforts focusing the healthcare teaching at the undergraduate and postgraduate level, and the competency development and evaluation and research as well. In the United States, the developed world, pneumonia and influenza account for only 2% of under 5 deaths. So there is a gross difference between 21% and 2%, with only negligible contribution from diarrheal diseases and malaria. So the problems of the developed and developing are definitely different. On the other hand, it is injury which is important and violence. Unintentional injury is the most common cause of death among US children aged 1 to 4 years, accounting for approximately 33% of the deaths, followed by congenital anomalies 11%, homicides 9%, and malignant neoplasms 8%. Other causes accounted for less than 5% of total mortality within this age group. Violence is a significant contributor to injury-related mortality in all age groups of children. Although unintentional injuries in developing countries are proportionately less important causes of mortality than in the developed countries, the absolute rates and the contributions of these injuries to morbidity and subsequent mortality are substantially greater. The infant mortality rate, that is deaths of children less than 1 year, accounts for 85% of the U5MR under 5 mortality rate in industrialized countries, but only 70% in the least developed nations. Neonatal less than 1 month death contributes substantially as well, growing in proportion as the U5MR decreases. Globally, the neonatal mortality rate of 19 per 1,000 live births represents 60% of the infant mortality rate and 45% of the U5MR. So if you want to bring down the mortality rate, the infant mortality rate, we have to work on the neonatal mortality rate and the perinatal mortality rate. The neonatal mortality rate is responsible for 56% of the U5MR in industrialized nations, 45% in developing countries, but 38% only in the least developed countries. More children less than 5 years old in developing countries die from non-birth related causes. Across the globe, there are significant variations in child mortality rates by nation, by region, by economic status, and by level of industrial development. The categorizations employed by the World Bank. As of 2015, 8 nations have a under 5 mortality rate of more than 100 per 1000 live births, all in African region. The average under 5 mortality rate in low income countries 76 per 1000 live births, and high income countries 6 per 1000 live births. So that is a gross difference in the mortality rate, the under 5 mortality rate. So the fall is not uniform in all countries. 50% of the achievement which was targeted between the 15 years to 2015. Income and wealth, however, are not the only determinants of mortality. For example, the United States has the 10th highest gross national income per capita, but ranked 57th in the lowest infant mortality rate in 2016. This gives the distribution of the under 5 mortality rate globally in 2015. Coming to the improvements in child health, a profound improvement in child health within industrialized nations occurred in the 20th century with the introduction of vaccines, of antibiotic agents, and of improved hygienic practices. These remain important as on date as well. Efforts to control infectious diseases were complemented by better understanding of the role of nutrition in preventing illness and maintaining health. In the United States, Canada, and parts of Europe, new and continuing discoveries in these areas led to the establishment of publicly funded well child clinics for the low income families as well. So the focus on improving nutrition for preventing illness and maintaining health, the focus on the vaccines, on antibiotic agents, and improved hygienic practices are the pathway which the industrialized nations have achieved of improvements in child health, which needs to be also practiced in the low income countries, and hence the need for the publicly funded well child clinics. Although the timing of infectious disease control was uneven around the globe, this focus on control was accompanied by significant decreases in both morbidity and mortality in all countries. Coming to chronic diseases, in the later 20th century, with improved control of infectious diseases through more effective prevention and treatment, including the eradication of polio in the Western Hemisphere, pediatric medicine in industrialized nations increasingly turn its attention to a broad spectrum of non-infectious, acute, and chronic conditions. These included potentially lethal conditions as well as temporarily or permanently handicapping conditions. Advances occurred in the diagnosis, care, and treatment of leukemia and other neoplasms, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, diseases of the newborn infant, congenital heart disease, genetic defects, rheumatic diseases, renal diseases, and metabolic and endocrine disorders. Until the 1970s and early 1980s, children affected with sickle cell disease often died within the first 3 years of life, often from overwhelming sepsis caused by encapsulated bacteria. In the 1980s, a multi-center study shows that early initiation of penicillin prophylaxis led to an 84% risk reduction for pneumococcal sepsis. Life expectancy for those with sickle cell disease increased when penicillin prophylaxis was initiated early in life. The use of prophylactic penicillin became the standard of care, increasing the importance of early detection of sickle cell disease, which led to expanding the universal newborn screening and paving the way for advances in the chronic management of this disease, including transfusion therapy, radiographic screening for silent cerebral infarctions, and hydroxyurea as a disease-modifying therapy. The success of penicillin prophylaxis likely led to a more rapid rate of innovation in the diagnosis and management of the disease, since children with the condition now had increased life expectancy, whereas in the pre-prophylaxis era, children often died by age 3. Now, 95% of the individuals born with sickle cell disease will live to their 18th birthday, and most will survive until their 5th decade. Continuing with the advances, the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL, the most common pediatric malignancy, has also shown amazing advances. 5-year survival rates have increased from less than 10% in the 1960s to more than 90% in 2000-2005, and is still improving. Cystic fibrosis has shown improvements in survival as well. In the 1960s, most children with cystic fibrosis did not live until in school entry. With advances in pulmonary and nutritional therapies, as well as earlier initiation of these therapies, secondary to earlier identification through newborn screening, a child born with cystic fibrosis in 2010 has a projected life expectancy of 39 to 56 years. These major advances in the management of chronic diseases of childhood were accomplished when significant improvement occurred in the prevention and treatment of acute infectious diseases, at least in the industrialized communities. This allowed human and economic resources to shift towards addressing chronic disease. Coming to the mortality rates and indices in India, the under 5 mortality rate, which we need to remember, in 2012, 52 per 1,000 live births. The infant mortality rate is going down further, 42 per 1,000 live births. The NMR, neonatal mortality rate, 29 per 1,000 live births, and the early neonatal mortality rate of 23 per 1,000 live births. In India, the causes of under 5 child deaths, if we see on either side of the dotted line, pneumonia still is at the top, forming 24%. 16% of the childhood pneumonia and 8% neonatal pneumonia. Prematurity is contributor for 18% of the neonatal deaths, which is very significant. Neonatal sepsis contributes 8%, birth asphyxia 10%, and malformations 4%. Other neonatal conditions 3% and neonatal diarrhea only 2%. So the four major killers under fire, particularly in the neonatal period, neonatal and pneumonia, next to prematurity and sepsis. So prematurity still is at the top cause, followed by the others. In children, besides pneumonia, the other major killers are the other disorders, which include the diarrheal disorders, 11%, and then coming down to the various other diseases in the other systems. Measles now contributes 3%, injuries are becoming important, 3%, and the continuation of this other conditions which may cause morbidity in the older child. To counter this, the government has the health system in India in the urban and rural. The rural health system works like a pyramid with the sub-centers, the ANFs, the ASHA village and AWs, the primary health centers with the MO and nurses, the community health centers where pediatrician comes into the picture along with the medical officer and nurses, the district hospital where pediatrician, medical officer and nurses, and the medical colleges which are the tertiary hospitals which have varying expertise of nurses, medical officers and pediatricians, including the development of specialties and subspecialties in pediatrics. The milestones in child survival in India, if you come to the 70s, the Family Welfare Program in 1977, the Diarrheal Disease Control Program in 1978, the Universal Immunization Program 1985, the ARI Acute Respiratory Infection Control Program of 1990, 1992 the Child Survival and Safe Motherhood Program CSSM, 1997 the Reproductive and Child Health 1, revised 2005 Reproductive and Child Health 2, in 2013 the RMNCH plus A strategy, that is the reproductive, maternal, neonatal and child health and adolescent health. So we need to extend our care well beyond the mid-childhood. Early childhood we mentioned is less than 5 years, mid-childhood is 5 to 10, 5 to 12 years, and beyond that from 13 to 19 or till 18 at least is the pre-adolescent, adolescent and post-pubescent. So that is the area where the youth need to be looked after, extending our healthcare system, both the OPD and the IPD, to involve the healthcare of the adolescents, providing facilities for them because they are the most productive segment of the population, and it is they who need to be protected by immunization, by antibiotics, by nutrition and other health programs specific to the problems of adolescents, which need attention both in counseling and the OPD and indoor admission facilities as well for the adolescent boys and girls, separate provisions for wards. So this is an area which needs to be developed in all institutes in the country, since pediatricians now have realized the increased responsibility for the adolescent age group. Obviously the sight of a 16-year boy or girl is different from a 61-year-old lady or gentleman, and therefore the sight being taken into care and consideration, the pattern of problems and the care they need to look after both at the outdoor and the indoor need special provisions, which responsibility should be the pediatricians. In 2014, the India Newborn Action Plan is come into work, and the development of various levels of care. From the first referral unit, the special care baby unit, special care neonatal unit, the neonatal intensive care are gradually being developed, and in relation to the delivery room practices, the newborn care corner. So that is very important for the survival of the newborn and attention to their problems, early detection and management. The practice of medicine is an art, not a trade, a calling, not a business, a calling in which your heart will be exercised equally with your head. As said by founding father of medicine, Sir William Osler from Canada, who was one of the 4 founders of the Johns Hopkins Institute, also responsible for transferring the teaching of medical students from the lecture room to the bedside clinic, which is where the real art and science of medicine needs to be learned to enhance the competency of the undergraduates and postgraduates in the medical curriculum. As of date, since the establishment of the Department of Pediatrics over the years in various institutes in the country, the undergraduate medical curriculum has achieved the separate entity in terms of pediatric evaluation, both theory and practicals in the final MBBS examination. Since we support and care and are responsible for 40% of the population, which is the pediatric population, and then can we make an impact on the total health output. Along with this, there has been development of not only at the MBBS level as a separate subject, but the postgraduate level as well, the diploma BCH in pediatrics. We started in Mumbai at the BJ Medical College by Dr. Coelho, and thereafter spread all over the country through the 60s, and thereafter the postgraduate degree MD Pediatrics courses have been started in various universities in our country, and now we have postdoctoral courses, DM courses in the various subspecialties of pediatrics, of neonatology at PGI Chandigarh and at AIIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, covering also an attention to the surgical aspects. Pediatric surgery has developed with the growth of DM neonatology. Other subspecialties of pediatrics which have developed and are blooming many places include pediatric cardiology, pediatric nephrology, pediatric endocrinology, and pediatric neurology, to name a few, as also some of the other branches, there is pediatric gastroenterology, pediatric hemato-oncology, and the metabolic disorders and genetic disorders, which also require attention and application in the near future. With this I wish you a thank you for your patient listening, and we come to the end of today's lecture. आरिफ इनको जरा बोल दो, मैं अभी तक ऑडिबल हूँ.